It is difficult, but it's possible to pass a Microsoft SPLA audit without penalties. And the results depend massively on whether you already have a compliance fortress in place, as we call it, which can lead straight to zero penalties, or whether you face an audit unprepared, as many of you may have already done, or may do in the nearest future. My name is Alexander Gordev, and I'm the head of consulting and services in the company called SAMexpert. We don't sell Microsoft licenses. We consult how to negotiate with Microsoft in all various circumstances you may imagine to reduce your costs or to reduce your penalties. And when I talk about penalties, I'm obviously talking about Microsoft penalties and SPLA compliance penalties for the purpose of today's event. SPLA audits cost service providers millions, sometimes tens of millions, sometimes, and I've seen that, and helped avoid that, hundreds of millions. The risks are usually underestimated by roughly 90%. So this is not a shocking number, this is a reality. This is statistics. The risks are underestimated by roughly 90%. And what you get is lost revenue, damaged reputation, strained client relationships, and last but not least, it's a very serious consequence, internal stress. And what I want to give you today is a bit of peace of mind. Because even when you aren't prepared for an audit and you get a letter, you may be undergoing one right now, that's why you're watching this video, there are still things you can and must do during the process. You can correct the way it goes to ensure that the final bill from Microsoft is as little as possible. During the course of today's event, please ask your questions in chats, or whether you're watching on LinkedIn or on YouTube, I will take your questions, even when you ask them during the live. And if you want to say hello, please say hello. So I want to give you that bit of peace of mind today, but I want to be very open with you. I don't want to dance around. There's no magical solution. For the complete peace of mind, you need to prepare for the audit upfront. You can start today. I'll give you actionable items today about it. And I will mention today the core building blocks for your fortress of compliance. Actually, that's what we provide to our clients. We call it peace of mind as a service. It's one of our offerings. And the other thing I want to do today is we've done these lives many times. I want to disclose some what we call trade secrets. They're not really secrets, just information that we use, the advice that we use, give it to our clients in a structured form today. You can find it scattered all over this channel. We have over 100 videos on the SPLA topic, and I'm talking about short videos, long lives, long videos that we started releasing in 2020. I'll mention specific clauses in the SPLA that can save you from headaches. Little known technical tricks to reduce your Visual Studio Office costs, and some strategic advice for handling auditors' overreach. And well, let's see what else we can manage to squeeze in 1 hour today. We have done it. I personally have done it over 100 times and saved close to $1 billion, if not over $1 billion, in audit penalties to various service providers. Starting from tiny audits where the penalty would be 50K and maybe sometimes hundreds of millions. We've seen that too. Not often, and it's never pleasant. And thus, what I tell you today is not a theoretical knowledge, it's our practice. We're sharing our pains, we're sharing our secrets, real life. If you do it yourselves, following our advice, I can't guarantee you that, but I will be pretty spot on that you can reduce your compliance by your non-compliance. You can reduce your non-compliance by half, by 50%, at least, maybe more, depending on how assertive you will be, but at the same time humble and assertive, truthful. That's the key. If you engage with a partner like us, on average, specialist companies, but please engage with a specialist company. There are so many imposters these days. A specialist can save you up to 80% of the initial audit bill. You won't pay the same sum that Microsoft initially will claim. But yes, you can go to zero penalties. And the claim of this life is how to get through a SPLA audit with zero penalties. You can go through SPLA audits with zero penalties. We've witnessed that too, and we helped other companies to do it, to bring it to a zero or to some ridiculous sum, for example, like €1,000. Really, seriously. But for that you will need building blocks like constantly maintained tool and a bulletproof legal framework. And these things I will also try and cover today as much as possible, as detailed as possible. And if you want more details, I encourage you to ask your questions. So for those of you who are unaware, what is a service provider SPLA audit by Microsoft? Microsoft audits service providers. Microsoft sends you a letter saying, according to the terms of your agreement, we will send you an independent auditor who will run scripts, gather the data, compare it with your reporting, and tell you whether you've been reporting SPLA compliance correctly. That's how it works. That's what they do. However, there are 4 types of audits, and let me quickly go through them so you understand the differences. The official audit always mentions a big 4 company: PwC, EY, KPMG, Deloitte. There'll be one of those companies assigned to perform an audit. Then the official audit, the licensing compliance audit, will not mention in the notice the so-called compliance with trade laws. So that's the other type of the audit run by the Big 4. When they mention compliance with trade laws, it's a completely different type of an audit. We're not going to cover it today, but for peace of mind, they're not going to check your licensing compliance. They're going to check whether you comply with anti-corruption and sanctions policies. Those 2 items. And there are also 2 types of self-assessment. They can also send you a letter. According to MBSA, they may ask you to self-assess yourselves, to do an audit internally, and you have to report them your findings. There's another type which is more rare, self-assessment assisted by a Microsoft partner. Not an independent consulting company or auditing company, by a Microsoft partner that they assign to you. What we're going to talk today about is the official, difficult, full-on license compliance audit. Let's quickly go through the process, and on each of the steps of the process, I'll tell you the common mistakes and what you can do in those circumstances, and how not to derail the audit. And at the very start, when you receive the letter, you must remember that you have 30 days to respond to that letter. You have to respond in 30 days, but you don't have to respond in a week, next day, in 10 days. So take a deep breath, talk to experts, gather an internal team, inform your stakeholders, assess the risks. You have 30 days to respond. Don't rush it. And after you respond, there may be other things you can do to delay the start of the audit. For example, sign a specific NDA with the auditor before they even engage with you on the first call. You can do that. The mistake here is to agree to very strict timelines that are imposed by Microsoft itself, by the way, violating their own terms of the SPLA agreement, and by the auditor, who will insist on a specific project. They may come to a massive provider and say, you have to give us script details in 10 days. It never happens like that. A large provider may take 3 to 6 months just to run the scripts. That's the reality. And you don't have to comply with any timelines. The only word in the SPLA agreement is reasonable time. So don't make that mistake, because you'll put yourselves under an absolutely unreasonable stress. Don't do that. Then you have the kickoff meeting with the auditor. And at the kickoff meeting, and when they send you a questionnaire, the mistake is oversharing. And starting from this point, through the entirety of the audit, oversharing Disclosing too much is a massive risk. It may not be anything bad, but you give them more information they shouldn't know because it's outside of scope. They start asking questions. Why did you even mention that environment if it's not SPLA? Okay, please explain to us how it works. And now you have to explain yourselves. So don't. Vet everything that goes to the auditor. Every single bit of data, every answer. Double check it, triple check it. You're in doubt, ask somebody. Ask us. Ask for a free consultation with us. We'll tell you what not to disclose. Another common mistake, and this is very serious. It's very serious. It's just underestimating the seriousness of the audit from the point of view of what arguments you can use. It is an audit. It requires hard evidence, and it requires meticulous approach to data. So no declarations, no manual CMDBs, no approximations, nothing is accepted unless it's solid evidence. Or you have a very, very solid reason why you can't provide solid evidence. And then you're in a gray area. It may be accepted, it may not be accepted. Another common mistake is misunderstanding the auditor's role. So the auditor is not your enemy. They're not. But they're not your friend either. And they're not truly independent. An auditor is not truly independent. They are paid by Microsoft. And the results of the audit always represents the Microsoft's position. It's not yours. Anything that you did, for example, overreporting consumption in some months, it won't be taken into account. All you will see in the report is the cases of you underreporting. Overreporting will still be there, but it won't make its way to the calculations. It will be completely ignored. I always question the independence of the auditor when they present it this way, because you can't be completely independent if you only represent the point of view of Microsoft, the worst case view. It's not as bad as Oracle, but it's not all pretty either. Data gathering. When you get to the data gathering and running scripts or extracting data from your tools, and we have a video that we did before, and we'll probably run it this year again, where we talk about every single bit of data that's required and why, and what you can do about it. Do you need to run the scripts? If you have any questions about it, either just rewatch videos on our channel or just ask us. Come to my DMs and ask us. Again, sharing wrong data sets. Providing an auditor that came to audit your SPLA estate with extracts from your non-SPLA environment, your internal use environment. You don't have to do it. Don't do it. It will be counted as SPLA, and then again, you have to explain yourselves. Why is it not SPLA? Why do you think it's not SPLA? If I was an auditor and I got that piece of data, I would start questioning it. Just to make sure that you're telling me everything. So don't overshare. And I'll continue repeating this mantra. Don't overshare. Then there's another thing that is very common, especially for infrastructures, the service providers or outsourcing providers, public cloud providers, problems with clients where there is no access to their virtual machines, and problems where you have access to their virtual machines, but you have complex licensing responsibility, BYOL, something like it, bring your own license. Microsoft, by default, and this is the hard truth, by default puts all responsibility on the provider. And it's hard work to prove otherwise. Can you do that? Yes, you can, and I'll tell you today how. Absolutely. I told you, we'll disclose some of the trade secrets today. The other mistake, when you have a validation call, again, I'll repeat it myself, oversharing and giving potentially incriminating answers during the validation call. There's always a validation call. When you provide them the data, there is a validation call. Normally, it's very benign. They just ask you to log into certain servers, confirm that installed SQL is indeed enterprise or standard. But sometimes there may be questions that they haven't asked before. Be vigilant, as always, in all these steps. Validate what you disclose. If you don't know the exact answer, take it as a homework. Saying something wrongly is a mistake. Then when the report is received, you can't skip validation of the report because they make mistakes. They make mistakes in formulas, so you have to be meticulous enough to push back on every unfair assumption. Let me show you an example of what I'm talking about. When I'm talking about the assumptions, what I mean. When they run the scripts, so this is, the dates here are old, 2021, 2020, but you'll get the idea. When they run the scripts, in this case in January 21, the data in the January 21 column is the actual data. The data for the previous month is extrapolated from the data that they got in January from running their scripts. And those extrapolations, those approximations are never exact, never precise. So you need to validate that. You need to validate installation dates. You need to validate client onboarding dates. It's your responsibility by the terms of the SPLA agreement to provide them the evidence to the contrary. They always assume the worst case. Again, that's how it's written in the legal terms of the SPLA agreement. It's not fair, but it is what it is. You signed it. And then after that report is handed over to Microsoft, you already have by that time to have a well-prepared story. No ambiguity, no BS, humble but assertive story about why, for example, you have a shortfall of Office licenses. There may be an honest reason, an honest mistake, a misunderstanding of rules. So when you go through an audit, it always helps to run a parallel calculation, either internally or with a partner like us, to establish whether there are any potential problems, even before you receive the report. And even after you receive the report, if you haven't done that, look at the gaps and build a story. Find explanations. But as I said, be truthful. It's very important, be truthful, and find as much hard evidence to that as possible. If a client asks you to deploy SQL Server Standard and your admins by accident deployed SQL Server Enterprise, there must be somewhere a record from the client saying, please install SQL Server Standard for us. Find that. This is your piece of evidence. So then if you haven't set up previously, before the audit, a well-oiled compliance machine, a well-built fortress of compliance, let me tell you the other most common mistakes that hit providers in audit, and also what can you do to improve your position now, before the audit, or even during an audit. These are not related to the steps of the audit. These are overall bits of SPLA compliance. So please listen carefully and take notes. First of all, first mistake is not complying with terms of SPLA and BSA. And it gets you in every type of the audit, including the trade law audit. There are a few things you must have, you must do to be able to separate your responsibility from your clients and partners. And the beauty of that is Microsoft itself tells you how. All of those requirements are written in the agreements, in SPLA and in the MBSA. There are complete requirements for the agreements you must have with your counterparts and with your end clients. And I'll start with the most obvious one and the most overlooked one, which is, to be honest, I have no explanation why it's overlooked. It's probably because nobody reads the terms of the SPLA agreement. You have to have a so-called end-user license terms signed by each end client. Not only SPLA requires it, it's a good idea, because EULT, paragraphs 13 and 14 of EULT, protect you in case of an audit, when it's not your fault, but then client's fault. And also, if you need to run the scripts and then clients in the end client's infrastructure, they say, what gives you rights to run scripts in our environment? EULT does. So you have to include it in all your master services agreement, in all your individual contracts with your clients, because it's the requirement of SPLA. If you provide SPLA services, EULT must be unchanged and included in your end user agreements. It does protect you. You can refer to that. You can use that for your protection. And if you don't have it, probably your SPLA agreement won't be cancelled. We've never seen that. But you're going to have a sorry face because it undermines your negotiation position. You're not complying with the terms of SPLA. Then you need to have, and recently Microsoft increased the number of those required agreements I think it happened in 2022 with one of the changes to the SPLA agreement terms. You have to have multiple agreements with your partners. What partners? Software services resellers. So you can legally put responsibility on a partner that resells your services to their clients when they resell your services to their clients. We had a case when we engaged with a provider that doesn't sell directly at all. Everything is sold through the channel. So that channel, those partners are so-called software services resellers. SPLA demands what exactly must be in your software services reseller agreement. Just do that. You want a template? Don't ask ChatGPT. Ask a specialist, ask a legal person that will read SPLA and compile a template based on the requirements in SPLA. It's very important that you follow exactly that, point by point. Then there may be relationship with so-called data center providers. And data center providers are other providers with SPLA that either use your data center for their SPLA services, or you may use their data center for your SPLA services. You must have agreements between the two of you. And the terms are outlined in SPLA. So you need to have that. It will be checked that you have those. And if you want to offload responsibility, say it's their fault, the auditors will ask you to provide evidence that the other party knew it's their responsibility, that it's not your responsibility. And where can they find the evidence? In a signed agreement. Just do it. Outsourcing companies. If somebody provides IT outsourcing on your behalf, you just outsource your IT services that you provide to your clients to somebody else. You must have an agreement with them as well. And that's also the conditions for that agreement are outlined in SPLA. The other mistake is not having your relevant records in order. And the funny thing about relevant records is that they're actually not defined. It's everything that is related to you selling your services, providing your services, change records, billing records, orders, all of that. Relevant records. Keep them organized. There's also, so this is enough topic for this particular live, but I must mention it. Reread the paragraph 4 of MBSA, Microsoft Business and Services Agreement, in regards to compliance with trade and anti-corruption law. Implement all that's written there. 2 policies, regular trainings. You'll see it's written in a very human-friendly language. So please check that, because if you get a trade law compliance audit, that's what they will be looking for, your compliance with that. Whether you check your clients against the so-called OFAC, you need to. The second point here is where you only provide infrastructure and platform, and when you allow your end clients to administer the service, do something on the service themselves, install software themselves, and bring their own licenses, whether you know about it or not, you must have 2 things in place. You just must have them, because otherwise you are responsible for everything what they install. The first thing is your agreements, your terms of service with the end clients. I already mentioned this, but let me reiterate this. They must clearly define the line between what you are responsible for and what they are responsible for. It must be there, must be very clear in the licensing language, not even legal language, legal plus licensing language. So the person that reviews those paragraphs really needs to know what they're talking about. Then the second bit that is also critical, mission critical here, is your portfolio of services must unambiguously define what licenses you provide and what licenses you don't provide. So why do you need that? It's so you can reduce the scope of what you're responsible for in your estate. Moreover, this is a very interesting part, a critical part for many of you, especially with massive estates. The most frequent question from infrastructure as a service providers that we get is, how do I avoid running auditor inventory scripts on customer virtual machines where we only provide the virtual machine image and we have no access, we don't manage what's inside? Microsoft will still insist, the auditor on behalf of Microsoft will still insist that you scan those virtual machines too. That is what SPLA agreement says in its terms, that you have to provide access to all the servers and systems running Microsoft software. In reality, nobody provides access, but the other option is to run the scripts. So I guess you can connect all the dots and understand that what they want you to do is to, regardless whether you have access or not, you have to scan those VMs. You can avoid that. You can avoid that. And we've won a few cases and this case, and we're very proud of that win. When you can explain why you can't, and when you can demonstrate that by the terms of your services, in all the descriptions and all your legal agreements, you don't provide any software outside of the operating system. But it must be professionally written. It must be clear and unambiguous. Ambiguity works against you. So be clear. Now, let's stop with the legal advice. Let's go to the most common technical mistakes. And, well, unfortunately, we're all humans. And without a good tool to monitor your SPLA estate all the time, mistakes happen. And mistakes happen also all the time. And I wish, after 100+ audits, I could say I've seen a pristine SPLA estate, but I can't. I'm sorry. Not a single time. What happens is sometimes wrong products are deployed. SQL Server Enterprise, a more expensive edition, instead of SQL Server Standard, a less expensive edition. Office Professional Plus, a more expensive Office instead of Office Standard, a less expensive Office. And often by mistake. And the client is still charged for the less expensive edition. Somebody made a mistake. A technical person, usually, that didn't have the exact spec of what to deploy, takes the installation media and installs the best, the brightest, and the most expensive edition, unfortunately. So what can you do? What can you do if you don't have a tool like this or you're just starting to deploy it? Audit today, I'm saying today, tomorrow, audit your entire hosting estate, find those instances where software is deployed by mistake, where wrong edition is deployed, where something should not be deployed at all, and just downgrade and remove. Start downgrading and removing today. You'll be surprised. If you don't have the whole visibility of your estate, you'll be surprised what you'll find. I promise you. The other one, which is even more expensive and accounts to 80% of all the penalties, user licenses. Products that are licensed per user and that are deployed and made available to more users than you need. And especially critical when there's Visual Studio, which is extortionately expensive. So to understand what I'm talking about, let's dive into the unpleasant licensing terms of such products. They are licensed per authorized user, not per active user, not per concurrent user, not per connection. Which means even if a user doesn't need that Visual Studio or Office, even if they never logged on, but they are allowed to log in and access it, just allowed, you have to pay for their license every month. Everything they can access, you have to pay for it. And what are the most common mistakes in that regard? So first one is all clients' users may be allowed to access remote terminals. And we're talking about differences of thousands employees of a company as opposed to, say, 100 that actually needs access. It's a mistake in the security configuration of the server. Everybody's allowed to access it, then you have to pay for everybody that is allowed to access it. It's a very common mistake to have at least one server in your estate. Please check your servers. You'll probably find it. I'll give it 50% probability. You'll probably find at least one server where all domain users are allowed to access the terminal, the remote desktop. The other mistake is keeping leavers and disabled accounts in the same security groups. So even when you do all the calculations correctly, the problem with disabled users and leavers, those who don't need this access anymore, is that although they may have been active a year ago, look at this report again. Sorry, this report again. Historic compliance is calculated based on their last activity. And if they were active if you look at the data in the report, August 2020, if they were active in August 2020, they will be counted as they required a license at the time. So maintaining your Active Directory pristine as possible is a key to look after the most problematic area in SPLA. It's not Windows Server, it's not SQL, it's the user licenses. So what you need to do starting today, after this live, or tomorrow morning, audit each server in your estate. And yes, it's that meticulous. Each server in your estate, because that's how RDS works, the access is configured at the local level. At least the servers and virtual machines where you have access, but especially the ones which you explicitly support. Check each and every one of them. If you have scripts or tools to help you to check them, brilliant. If you don't, wow. If you find that there are users and groups that shouldn't be there, remove them. Delete them from the RDP access. Reduce access permissions to the absolute minimum. Remove excess security groups and users. Delete leavers and disabled accounts from inside those security groups. Keep it clean. And do this exercise ideally every month, but realistically every quarter. If you already passed the inventory data with these mistakes and errors to the auditor, at this point in time, there's nothing you can do to reduce the numbers in the report. However, if you find that you made an honest mistake, for example, domain users were never supposed to be allowed to access all the servers, tell it to the auditor. Leave a comment in the ELP saying, this was an honest mistake, this was never supposed to happen, look at all the other servers, story. Tell them a truthful story. Let it be recorded, because that will then go to Microsoft and help you to negotiate the final bill and to discount that honest mistake. Microsoft may even send it back to the auditor to say, okay, fine, we agree that this was an honest mistake, please recalculate. So if you are in that position when only during an audit you realize that your administrators deployed, for example, Office Professional Plus instead of Office Standard, you may attempt during the audit to reinstall it and provide evidence of that to the auditor during the course of the audit. Just to say, for example, I'm just giving you a hypothetical example. Hello, dear auditor. We found, after we provided you the data, that on these servers we installed Office Professional Plus by mistake. We have downgraded it to Office Standard, and here's the evidence of why we think it's a mistake. Client email, an apology from the system administrator. And here are the updated scans after we replaced it. Can you please flag it in the report that was an honest mistake? Again, it will help you negotiate with Microsoft. I'm disclosing your secrets, by the way. Nobody will tell you that. It won't change the numbers in the report, so don't expect that. But it should be reflected in the report that you made an honest mistake and provided evidence of fixing it. And doing that will help you convince Microsoft to reduce the penalties. So, okay, if you weren't prepared for an audit, and the audit discovers that mistakes you made in configuration or errors, is all lost? No, it's not. It's still possible to reduce your final bill for Microsoft on average by 80%, as I said, but you must employ humility and assertiveness at the same time. You need a story. You need a story around all those mistakes. Why did it happen? Why was the wrong piece of software installed? Was it your end client that did it? Can you prove it? Are you even contractually responsible for that piece of software in your service definitions and in the order forms? Or is the responsibility on the end client clearly defined in your terms and conditions? What was your original intent? and you will need to prove your story. You will need to provide evidence. If your legal framework and processes were weak just before the audit, don't ever wait until it ends. So many wait, don't wait, begin improving your terms ASAP. So you can demonstrate it to the auditor during the technical phase and to Microsoft during negotiations. Microsoft is not only looking to recover the revenue, they're also looking to strategically fix misunderstanding of SPLA, to strategically teach you to report consumption correctly. And I'm not advocating for Microsoft, I'm justifying them. I don't care about Microsoft. But that's the truth. That's what we get from Microsoft in various negotiations. So begin improving your legal bits and technical bits ASAP, and then demonstrate it to auditor during the technical phase, as I said, and then to Microsoft during the negotiation. And I think by this time, we've already been talking for 36 minutes. I want to return to the claim of this event, pass a SPLA audit with 0 penalties. Yes, it's possible. But to guarantee that, this is the painful truth. You need to invest in what we call a fortress of compliance. And unfortunately, for many, I have to set your expectations very straight from the start. This is not a one-off exercise. It's a management framework, including tools, processes, and trained people. Firstly, a tool alone won't solve it. It won't solve it, but you still need a tool. You need a tool that will alert you of anything that's wrong, non-compliant or potentially non-compliant as soon as it appears. Can you write your own scripts? Yes, we've seen working scripts. The problem with scripts, the most common problem with the scripts we've seen is that scripts are written for a particular configuration. They only target specific security groups. They only count users on those servers. The scripts are not usually written in a way which catches any human errors. What if there's another group and your script only counts that one? What if there's another server and it's not in the list? So if you're writing a scripting solution, don't make it narrow, targeted. Make it universal. Make it so it's a proper audit script with the word audit in mind. So it will audit everything in your estate, not just what you told it to audit. But a good specialized tool has much more than that. A good specialized tool may have billing options, may have something like it. It's just better than a script. And one of the benefits of having a tool, which you can also script, by the way, there's no secret, is keeping and presenting, the ability to present historic evidence. So as you, again, look at this slide, auditors extrapolate. Extrapolation is rarely precise. When you have historic evidence, it's a walk in the park to explain why, for example, you paid 20% less exactly a year ago from now. It's not always possible without historical evidence. It's not always possible to correctly extrapolate from the current snapshot of data. Historical evidence, as long as you did it correctly, is your friend. Now, this is the point where I must warn you that there are only 2 tools right now that we have seen in our practice working for SPLA. It's Octopus Cloud, and SPLA Manager. That is it. Cutoff point. There are no other tools that work for providers. There may be 1 or 2 more claimed to work for providers, but we've never seen them in practice, and we can only tell from our experience. Unfortunately, we hear every week, and just before this live event, I had a call with a provider that said that they were approached by traditional SAM tool sales teams with the promise of, yes, our tool can do SPLA. No, it can't. Traditional big name SAM tools, and I specifically don't want to mention them today, not to offend them, but you know whom I'm talking about, they do not work for SPLA. It's that categorical. Yes, you may use the data from them to calculate some basic products like Windows Server and SQL Server. But for example, traditional big SAM tools don't know the formulas to calculate SPLA licenses. And they're not the same formulas as you use for on-premise. They're different, and they don't know. But you can use the data. But there are other bits of data, for example, user licenses, that traditional SAM tools simply do not return. They don't know where to look. They don't have the module to extract the data. And what do? You invest in such a tool, you buy a license, you subscribe for a year, 3 years, and then you realize after a while that it's not working. So, Octopus Cloud, SPLA Manager, that's it. I specifically give you 2 tools, so not to be biased. Secondly, what you need to put in place to build that fortress of compliance is you need to review and constantly maintain the legal framework, what I just mentioned. EULT, software services reseller agreement, outsourcing company agreement, data center agreement, all of that should be up to date, plus your trade law compliance policies and practices. Clearly define what licenses and services you provide through each service. Itemize them to the single point. I'm really that meticulous. Exact products, not hypothetical database and operating system, exact products. And make sure that your terms of service define end client responsibility for compliance in a way that's unambiguous. The third thing to put in place is to keep detailed change records, as in who asked to install that SQL server, when, what date, when was it installed, using which licenses, using which media. Record all the status changes, installations, deployments, changes in configuration, new users and groups, all of it. And by the way, new users and groups. We've seen cases, not rare, of service providers undercharging the end client because the initial sale for a long-term contract went to the client with 20 user licenses. During the course of the service, the client came back and said, I need to add 80 more. So they started consuming 100 licenses. Sales and billing department had no idea that happened. Guess what? They undercharged the client. They underpaid to Microsoft. When they had an audit, they had to reimburse those fees to Microsoft. They will never be able to recover them from the client. It's not possible. Well, in their circumstances, I can imagine how it can be done. So you need to always be able to answer what, who, when, and why at any time, clearly. Then the fourth point, ideally, and if you're a CSP hoster, my condolences, it's compulsory, ask your end clients for evidence of licenses when they bring their own licenses. And point number 5, and I'm repeating myself, regularly review both the technical and the contractual elements, your tool and your legal framework. Make sure the tool still works, the coverage is perfect, and the legal framework is up to date, and the service descriptions are up to date. Do that ideally quarterly, not ideally annually. Get help from a partner like us, not necessarily us. Obviously, I'm presenting this video, but find somebody who has extensive experience, knows how to achieve the results quicker, cheaper, and with more efficiency. Somebody who can provide referrals. Be very aware of free helpers and asking your resellers, because they will never go the whole way. They will never help you to really, really nail that. So just be careful. So we've covered a lot today in 44 minutes. And if you're feeling overwhelmed or want a second opinion on your SPLA setup, on your SPLA compliance, we offer free, no strings attached consultations. I'll put the link in the description on YouTube. It's not yet there. And if you follow us on LinkedIn, please just feel free to DM me at any time. This is the time for your questions, so I'll take some. Hi, Sasha. Did you say that we need to report RDS sales for service without RDS host role? Or is there some basic assumption the service without the RDS host role are not accessed by dozens of end users because they obviously would have to use only 2 sessions? I haven't sysadmin for 10 years. But we had this argument recently with an auditor, and they demonstrated to us that even without the RDS host role, for some reason, when there's an RDS remote desktop users group, users were able to log in, not via the admin sessions. I didn't expect to see that, and maybe there was some sort of magic, smoke and mirrors behind the scenes. But basically, let me answer your question in a more generic way. If you are sure and you can demonstrate that the users cannot access the server without being a local admin, then you don't have to report them. I hope it's clear. Good question. Thank you, by the way. Thank you for that question. It's a very good question. So another question I have is, this came through LinkedIn. We're a small provider. Is SPLA compliance really that important for us? Microsoft audits almost every provider, but small providers, in our experience, they receive self-assessment letters. And the question is always, how much is the potential damage that you can make to Microsoft? Because for Microsoft, the cost of a SPLA audit is roughly $30 to $50K. So if they can't recover more than that, then they probably won't touch you. But most probably, you will receive a self-assessment letter. With the self-assessment letters, my advice is never to just shove it back and say, we're fine. Assess yourselves. You will find non-compliance. Tell them we fixed it. Start reporting correct numbers from next month. And usually, for a small provider, that's the best idea. But if they perceive, they don't have to know that you may be liable for 50 to 100K. There's a chance you can get an audit. The other question is, we use a traditional SAM tool. So I won't name the tool. They gave me a tool name. Why do you say it's not enough for SPLA? Well, as I explained, traditional SAM tools don't know the formulas. It's bad enough already. And they also don't know how to calculate user licenses. They just don't know how to calculate user licenses. In addition, they don't keep historic evidence. And by the way, if you're interested, please send me a DM or message, an email to ask@SAMexpert.com. I have a checklist. It's a PDF with almost 30 points. Sort of a checklist that then you can use in your RFP for a SPLA tool and see how many of those boxes will be ticked by a traditional SAM tool. And you'll see it for yourself. This is a completely free, no strings attached thing. Just ask me and I'll provide you that checklist. It's a good one. I regret that Daryl couldn't join, my business partner. It's more in his area, but I'll take it. We received a closing letter from Microsoft. Even after all negotiations, we cannot afford to pay this sum. What can we do? Well, also, it's not an unseen scenario. Fortunately, it will involve a lot of work. It will involve providing financial evidence. Fortunately, you can negotiate that. You'll spend months and months and months. That's our experience. But I can't guarantee anything for Microsoft. I'm not Microsoft. Their idea is not to close you. Their idea is not to suffocate you. They want you to continue doing your business. So use that as an argument. Show them your P&L. Show them, explain to them why you can't afford that. Show them strategic expansion on Microsoft products, your movement to AI, whatever other tools that they may like. And this is how you do it. So unfortunately, it's a painful negotiation. It's not like we haven't seen when the company's profit is 100K and the audit letter comes with 1.5 million. This happens. So be reasonable. Present a case. Tell a story. And on this note, I invite you to follow us and subscribe to come to other events. We're going to have, this year, we're going to have a mix of enterprise agreement, SPLA, and Azure events, lots of Azure focus. Everything around Microsoft savings, so just savings. We sell savings. We sell peace of mind and savings. And I wish you all passing audits with zero penalties. Thank you. Goodbye.